Welcome to the Lighthouse Podcast, a resource created by Lighthouse Family Retreat to strengthen families living through childhood cancer. You'll hear stories from families, educational information on childhood cancer, and most importantly, we will be there to encourage your family during your journey. So we are really blessed today to have Alan Bohnhoff with us. Alan is a professional counselor and he has lots of experience working with families. And he's going to talk to us today about one of our biggest topics, and that's parenting. Parenting is hard in the best circumstances and in a challenging time when your child has cancer and you potentially have siblings and you're trying to parent everybody. Let's just say we need all the help we can get in that situation. Alan, Chris and I are really, really grateful that you took some time out of your day to talk to us today about a topic that is really near and dear to our hearts and something that Lighthouse focuses on all the time, which is we're going to talk today a little bit about parenting, and not just parenting in general, but parenting a very specific group that we love so much, the siblings. It's just a topic that we hear all the time is a problem. I experienced it when you have a child on treatment and you have other children. This is a really, really hard journey for them as well. So we're just really grateful that you're with us today to talk through some of the steps that we can take. To start, can you just share with us just a little bit about you and your background and what you do?
Okay, sure. Yeah, and thank you for having me. I agree this is a really critical topic, and I actually love talking about it. I am a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia, and I do most of my work with Bethel Haven, which is a Christian nonprofit counseling organization in Watkinsville, Georgia. And Watkinsville is a few miles from Athens, which is the home of the University of Georgia. So that helps people kind of understand if you've never heard of Watkinsville before. I am a husband of 44 years. I have 4 grown children, 7 grown children to date. And I have one sort of unique thing about me, I guess, is that I have a kind of a unique career path. My undergraduate degree was actually in electrical engineering, and I worked for many, many years in large corporations doing engineering and project management until I decided I wanted to do something else. So I went back to school. I got my master's degree, and I've been practicing in Watkinsville for a little over 4 years.
Not only do you have the schooling, right, the education, but you certainly have the life experience as well from a marriage, parenting, grandparenting. Yeah, that's its own education in itself. So I'm excited to learn from you.
Yeah, I tell my clients, and particularly my couples clients, that I made all the mistakes they could possibly ever make. So I can certainly relate to them.
I love it.
So you've done some research on this particular topic and what we're calling today parenting the other being the siblings. Can you just give us a little bit about what this kind of means? Sure.
Well, the way this came about for me is Bethel Haven has a partnership with Extra Special People, ESP, which is also a nonprofit in Watkinsville, and ESP has programs and support for children and young adults with developmental disabilities. And so we run into the same type of issue in these families, because you have a special needs child who demands needs and demands a lot of attention, and then and sometimes more than one special needs child. And then, you also have the more typical non-special needs child in those families as well. And so it sets up that same dynamic of kind of the other child. And so I've been able to, I do a lot of work with the parents, seminars with them. So I've been able to work with these parents a lot, both in kind of this kind of a setting, but also just in actually counseling with parents. And so this has become a really important topic for me to understand and work with my clients.
That's awesome. I love the partnership with ESP. We're familiar with the work they do. They do some great work, and it's such a parallel with us. And having a child on treatment, and for us, it maybe is a little bit more. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because treatment for a lot of families, not all, is going to end. For some, it's just an ongoing process for many years. Versus, with ESP, I know they may have that disability for life, right? And so it's just figuring out how to parent that other. What have you seen are some of the specific challenges that parents have regarding parenting siblings?
Well, first of all, just the family situation is typically already kind of stretched, and resources are stretched. And I think when the parent realizes there's some issues going on with the other child, they're trying to figure out how to parent them, then that just kind of increases the pressure that they feel, some of the guilt they feel that they don't feel like they have the capacity to really take care of the other child the way they want to. And so, it causes a lot of dynamics in the family, and I think the toughest things are the questions, that the other child has that are so difficult for parents to answer. Like, why does it seem like mommy and daddy are always worried about this, my sibling? Why aren't they paying attention to me? Is there something wrong with me? It's just something they don't like about me, which is heart-wrenching. And then, and maybe the worst is when they start feeling like they did something wrong to cause the situation. And I think that's just really, really hard for parents, and it can cause a lot of guilt because, typically that other child didn't do anything, to bring on the situation. So it's just a very difficult set of dynamics that parents have to deal with.
Yeah, can we touch on the guilt a little bit? I think that was something I struggled with. I knew that I wasn't parenting the same and parenting the other Carter's brothers the same, but at the same time, I was stretched physically and emotionally and resources and everything. And so I think that was something I struggled with for a really long time. It's just, I should be doing better, but it's really hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. And like you mentioned before, guilt is a big issue, and just stress in general, the stress of, and we know the kinds of issues that stress causes, both individually, if it's a single mom, or dad taking care of the situation, or, what I also see is for couples, when you're in a highly stressful situation, it's just really hard on marriage. It just puts a lot of additional pressure. And if you're not careful, you start to blame each other for things that are happening. It just can cause some real marital issues as well. So it's difficult for parents.
Yeah, it's just tough for parenting's already hard, right? And then you add that in, and it just becomes that much more difficult because you want to equally be there for each and every kid that you have, and then you're now wrestling with that challenge of how do I give my time when this one just unfortunately requires so much. Let's talk about the siblings. Let's talk about the kids for a minute. Their feelings, right, and these feelings of being left out. Right? You mentioned that. How does that manifest in these kids? What does that look like when that's playing out for them?
Yeah. Well, there can be some very very dramatic situations because, first of all, sometimes there's resentment. They feel like things are not equal and they're being left out, and so there's some resentment that can come up with that. I think there's frustration. I would like to do things, or I would like to have things that I can't because of the situation. I think that causes frustration and anger. So a lot of times what parents tell me is that acting out is a big problem because, and we see this with typical kids as well, but if they don't feel like they're getting attention and they start to act out in order to get attention, and unfortunately they feel like negative attention is attention. It's better than nothing. So acting out tends to be one of the big things that I hear from parents that are happening.
Yeah, even in our home, and we're not in the childhood cancer situation, but even in our home, we talk with our kids about getting the positive attention, not the negative attention. But it's all really, it's not misbehaving, right, Alan? It's they're throwing up a flag. It's saying, I need your attention, and right now this is the only way that I feel like I can get it. And I know in parenting, right, we often look at that behavior and we see it as, okay, they're just misbehaving, they need to be disciplined or whatever. And it's really less about that and more of they're waving the white flag.
That's right. It's their way of coping and giving the parent the message that something's not right here. I don't feel like this is right, and I need help, and I need attention, and this is the only way I seem to be able to get it. So if parents, like you said, if they can focus on the message behind the behavior and try to understand that, then it's easier to deal with. It's still difficult.
Yeah, it's still difficult, right? I guess, like we said, parenting is hard, and you add this in, it's even harder. And so it's trying to put up that filter of trying to know and expect that this is coming. It is a behavior that will be there, and flagging it in our brain to say, when this happens, don't respond how I normally would, but to read it as this is a white flag. You mentioned some of these behaviors, and some of them were more of maybe the aggressive behaviors, the frustration, the acting out, the anger. Are there some passive behaviors that play out as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that may happen is the child feels like they're in a situation where they're unable or maybe unwilling to try to get the attention that they need. And so they may not, it may not be an active thing. It may be very difficult to see, but some of the things that they may do as a result of that is just deciding, well, mom and dad don't really have time to take care of me, so I guess I just have to take care of myself, and so they start feeling the pressure of being their own caretaker to some degree. Or they may react by saying, I see that mommy and daddy are overloaded. I'm going to jump in here and help. I'm going to be the helper. And they feel too responsible for what's going on in the family, and not just being the child, but trying to help, parentify. And so that's one. I think another one is just kind of this reaction of being, well, I've got to be extra good. I got to be on my best behavior because I don't want to put any more pressure on mom and dad, and so that in turn puts that pressure back on the child to maybe be something or do something they don't have the capability of being. So those are some of the things that I know of at the moment.
Yeah, I hear a lot of times, in adult stories, at least that I know, where they talk about they had to step in to that, or they reacted like that, and they talk about how they had to grow up too fast, right? Yeah, and didn't get to experience maybe as much of their as of their childhood, which is tough. Yeah, which is tough.
So, Alan, as a parent that went through this, and parents that are listening now, what are some things that parents can do that can maybe just kind of help out the siblings a little bit, or just make them more aware? What are some steps that we could take?
Sure. Well, there are 5 things that I've come up with, and I've gotten good feedback from parents that these really are things that are helpful. And I think the most important one is to talk openly. I mentioned at the beginning some of the questions that are rolling around in the other kid's mind about what is happening here, why is this happening, why am I feeling this way? And they may not express it, but the parent can be proactive, and it's better to over-communicate and try to answer the questions you feel like that child may be having, rather than wait for them to ask those questions. So really, really talking about it.
This one was really convicting for me when you started talking, because I think as a parent, my kids were younger, and a lot of our families, the kids are young. I wanted to protect everybody. So I didn't want to bring up things or make them sad or make them worried. So I didn't talk about it. And, through this podcast and just with my job in general, I've been talking to a lot of siblings that are now adults. And one of the things I hear from these adults now saying, I just didn't know what was going on. And my parents we didn't talk about it, and how alienated that made them feel. Like it made them feel more removed from the situation. Like mom and dad and my special brother or sister are over here, and I'm just not part of the group because I don't know what's going on. So I think that's interesting. Just an interesting thought for parents who might be on the other end, like I was, like, I just don't want to, I don't want to. It's a scary topic. I mean, their sibling is sick and you don't want to worry them. So that one is really interesting to me.
Yeah. I think you're right. It's hard to be open about these things, but the kids have questions. And again, I feel like it's better to over communicate and make sure that they understand rather than just have unanswered questions.
There's this phrase that we've been using in our home recently, and I think is applicable here. We talk about it in terms of the context of how we grew up and the fear of not wanting our kids to grow up similar, and so trying not to parent out of fear. And right. So I think this kind of aligns with that of making those decisions, trying not to be fearful of what this conversation will do, but parenting out of truth and honesty and trying to be upfront. And I also think about, Alan, with this is, not every kid's probably always going to be as comfortable maybe asking questions of their parents. And so this probably also, especially as kids get a little bit older, you get in those teenage years thinking through trying to get them surrounded with other adults that can speak into their life and be because maybe they will be more comfortable going to, if maybe it's a youth pastor or a good friend's parent that they're connected with and that they're comfortable in their home, or just different things like that, mentor, coach, different types of folks. Even trying to make sure your kids are surrounded by other adults as they get older. I think that's probably a really good thing too. So that's great. I love that. So that's one. That's one of the steps.
Okay. Number two is what I call spread the praise around. Sometimes there's a tendency, if you have a special situation, you really want to make that child feel like they're making progress and they're doing these things. And if we're not careful, we focus the praise on that special need, and the other child sitting over here, feeling like, well, what about me? So I think when we are in those situations where we're praising one child, we need to just kind of spread it around and make sure that we address and we see and we address things in their lives, because that says, I'm paying attention to you. I see what's going on with you. I appreciate this, what's happening with you. And that just means a ton, to kids to get that kind of attention.
I love that.
Yeah. And kind of going along with that, my third one is to try to set aside some time for each child. I know this is a really difficult one, and parents talk to me a lot about this, but I think if we set our expectations, even a little time, trying to spread a little time around and make it special with the other children really is a huge difference. It makes them feel close to you and so much more a part of what's happening. So, trying to spend some one-on-one time with them in some way is really a big one.
This one is key to me because I think, again, speaking on my own experience, the thing that bothered my other boys the most was the time I was with Carter. And, little kids count time as like any time. They didn't see my day in the hospital with treatment. To me, I'm like, we're having chemo for a whole day. What my son saw was Carter's getting Chick-fil-A and movies with mom, and I'm in school. And so time, I found, was more than anything, the time was the key thing that they were jealous of or resentful of or took to me as me saying, I don't love you as much. It was the time. So, but I'm a planner. So I will say you have to kind of plan that, because the days go by fast and you get caught up in whatever you're already doing. And this is something I think that you have to be really intentional. Yeah. And even if you have to put it on your calendar, but the time thing to me is a key thing.
Yeah, I would think almost it's like if you're in those situations where, you are going to Chick-fil-A and you are going to it's almost like pulling that other sibling out, pull them out for half a day and take them to Chick-fil-A, and it's just like they get to experience some of that as well, but it's them. It's one-on-one. I love the idea of the one-on-one. I think being able to figure out how to do that, and it doesn't have to be big and extravagant.
No, I don't think they need fireworks. Yeah. I think they just want to know that it's special, and I love the idea of pulling them out, because that's something like moms would never do, and so that makes them feel like mom must really want to spend time with me if she's going to pull me out of school and take me to Chick-fil-A. I mean, that's like double party right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great surprise, right? You show up at school and they're like, why are you getting me something? No, we're just going to go hang out.
It's a good reason.
Yeah, that's a great reason. It's a great reason. I love that.
Well, one thing that, moving on to number 4, is that, we talked about guilt earlier, and I think one of the things that I've heard a lot is that feeling guilty can tend to make you a little more permissive as a parent. It's already hard to be that parent and really say what needs to be said, what needs to be said. But if you're already feeling guilty that you haven't been giving that child attention or whatever, there's a tendency to kind of be more permissive and let them, get away with more than you might normally, or something like that. And so, to me, just being aware of that and trying to make sure that dynamic is not what's happening is really important as well.
I would think that there's definitely times where there's some grace in parenting where that happens, right? It's being aware of it so that it doesn't get away from you. Because once it gets away from you, it's really hard to reel that back in, right? So that's why I think that's so important.
Yeah, and it's, nobody's a perfect parent. And we realize, hey, in that situation, I think it's a little permissive. You just make small corrections and say, okay, I just need to be a little bit more on top of that. It's really important not to increase your own guilt by saying, oh my gosh, now I'm failing at this as well.
Right.
It's not like that. It's just make those small corrections, and kids are resilient. They will bounce back, but we really do have to be mindful, like you're saying. Yeah. The last one I think is super important, because it's so hard to think of good outcomes whenever we're in this situation. How could this possibly result in anything good? But the matter of the fact is that there are positive outcomes, for kids who are in this situation where they see, siblings going through some really tough things, and they get involved and they help, and they're part of the family, and they give and they have to sacrifice a little bit. Those are not bad things. And what I see and what I'm told by parents is that a lot of times that ends up helping that other child become more patient, become more compassionate, kind, understanding than some other children who don't go through things like that. So it's certainly is character development, and it's difficult when we're going through it, but realizing that, again, God can bring great things out of really hard situations. And this is one where I think it's just so true that there can be really positive effects on these other children by being in a family where there's really some hard problems going on.
Yeah.
That is so important to point out to parents, because you really don't see it when you're in it. But like the families that we serve and we spend time with, some of the greatest kids on the planet. I mean, the maturity and the perspective they have, and they're going to take that with them the rest of their life. And it's easy for me to say, because I have hindsight now and I can look back and say, that's something I'm super grateful for. But I know if you're in it right now, you're just seeing kids running everywhere and you're thinking, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to parent through this? But I do think that is a key thing, that to know that these kids come out with this great perspective and this, this love and caring that they're going to take with them into other situations and for the rest of their lives.
That's right. It's going to help them be good friends, good citizens, good partners, because they're sensitized to other people's needs more. And so there can really be some positive things that come out of it.
Absolutely. And then you got to celebrate that stuff.
Yes.
And look where you're going to. Right. I love the 5 steps, Alan. I think they're fantastic because they're simple. Right? They're not rocket science. They're not like, gosh, I hear that, there's no way I can figure out how to do that. They're things that as a parent, if we're intentional and we're thinking about it, which is hard to do in the middle of childhood cancer with everything going on in the fog and the chaos. But if you're intentional and you're thinking about it, these are actionable. There are things that they can do in the home. They could start today, right, and doing some of these things. And you don't have to be perfect and do them all, but it's looking for those opportunities to try to see where do you weave these in to your day-to-day parenting. And we've talked about this on another podcast, but parents, just giving yourself some grace. You're not going to be perfect at these 5. When you walk out of here and listen to this, you're not going to go out and be great at them, but just try each day to get a little bit better at 1 or 2 of them, and you're going to, I think, start to see a difference in how you parent and how these siblings respond. And so thank you for sharing those 5 steps. Those are fantastic. And then just giving us some context on how to, I love the topic of parenting these siblings. Super, super helpful. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience. It's I think it's really going to benefit our listeners tremendously. So
absolutely. Just knowing if, maybe these families don't know other families going through this, so they might be looking at the situation thinking, it's just my kids. It's just how I'm parenting. That this is something that all parents that go through a journey like this, they all experience some or all of what we've talked about today. So it's not just that you're not doing a good job as a parent, it's the circumstances you're in, and it makes everything harder.
Yeah. So, Alan, thanks for making time in this day to spend it with us and share with our listeners. We really appreciate you and all that you contributed today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real honor to be able to join with you and hopefully to help parents, because like I said, it's a tough thing that they're doing, and my hat's off to the parents that are going through this, and anything we can do to encourage them, I'm all for it.
Alan, I'll be honest, I really wish I'd met you about 10 years ago. That was really great advice. Thank you. And to parents who may be listening today, we hope this was helpful. And if you know anyone else facing these challenges, please share our podcast with them. Also, we would love if you would take the time to rate and review this podcast so it can reach more families. Thanks for being here today, and we'll see you later on the next episode.